we've been wondering why it is that there are so many people who, in as much as Donald Trump is shown to be incapable of doing anything presidential, that he is incompetent, that he cannot speak well, that he cannot think well, that he's a convicted criminal, a convicted felon, that he has pulled on women's, you know what, that he has been found guilty of assaulting women, that he had all these negative things, that he has ripped people off with false universities, airline. I mean, this guy is just the bastion of degeneracy. And there's still a group of folk that are willing to vote for him because of what he represents. And, you know, a lot of people want to say it, but they don't quite know how to say it. To some, people look at this as a turning point for them, an existential point for them. He is their savior. He's going to ensure that they can remain on top, as if we need to caste system. We have a caste system where certain folks are the only ones that belong on top. Isabel Wilkerson, the author of Caste, she says it best. So I want you to listen to this short interview that she had with Lawrence O'Donnell, because I think she nails it. But she don't only nail it, she also points out what needs to be done. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
It is an honor to have Isabel Wilkerson joining our discussion. She is Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of the New York Times bestseller, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. This is such an important moment in our history, and I am wondering what we are seeing. And one thing I'm wondering is how, especially tonight with the contrast she drew in that speech, how can this person who's done everything right, everything that you ask someone to do growing up in this society, does her homework, goes to college, goes to law school, prosecutor, attorney general, senator, vice president, running against a convicted felon who is grotesquely and obviously incompetent, who cannot speak English in any accepted form, how can that be as close as it is? Why doesn't she have 90% of the vote? What are we missing here?
Well, first of all, it's wonderful to be back here with you. Thank you. When we look at this, when people look at this as an election or only as an election, then it doesn't make sense.
Right.
When you look at this as an existential crisis over what the country will be, then it begins to make sense. People are not voting against their own interests. People are not voting against their own interests. They're voting for the interests that matter most to them. And for many, many, many Americans, as we saw on January 6th, this means maintaining their position at the very top of the American hierarchy, at the top of the American caste system, with all the rights and privileges that accrue to that. And that is not something that maybe is in the best interest of the planet or the country, but that is the best interest of the people as they ascertain it for themselves.
So rich kid, growing up rich kid, Tucker Carlson, now professional, public, white racist, is up there on a Trump stage, supporting the same candidate who someone living on Social Security somewhere in Arkansas, Alabama, and trying to get by is voting for that same candidate. And what unites them is that they are both voting for their caste in this society.
You know, caste is an arbitrary graded ranking of human value in the society, and it's what determines rights, privileges, who will be protected by the authorities and who will be attacked by the authorities. And so when this system has been in place for 248 years, we were forged in revolution and in civil war. We should not be the least bit surprised at the enduring divisions that we are seeing right now. And this is rising up in part because of 2042. It's rising up in part because of the demographic shift that we are facing as a country. You know, in 2020, the census of 2020 found that for the first time in American history, the historical majority in this country, white Americans, that group is the only group whose numbers fell for the first time in American history. All other groups were either the same or they rose slightly. And so that's an existential crisis for everyone, actually, because everyone is affected by the demographics of our country. And As a result of that, that is why we're seeing so much of the fixation on immigration. Who gets to be in this country? What parts of the world are immigrants from? What parts of the world are they welcome here in this country? And also the fixation on births, not just abortion, but on births. Because with Griswold, we know, the Supreme Court case involving Griswold, that birth control is also on the table. And so these things are coalescing as part of the existential crisis that we're facing as a country. And what we are tasked with having to do is to figure out how can we figure out a way to imagine what we could be as a nation, even if the demographics are not the same. But this sense of dread, the sense of fear, is what's driving so much of what we're seeing.
So if Kamala Harris wins by 1% of the vote, becomes the next president of the United States, what's driving the Trump vote doesn't disappear.
The question would be, what would be the backlash? What would be the response? Whatever happens with this election, first of all, it's not about this election or any singular election. This is something that is our inheritance as Americans. These divisions that we are experiencing now are part of our inheritance, and it doesn't go away after an election. The passions and the grievances and the insecurities and the fears will still be there. And we as a nation will be still dealing with the divide, this chasm between groups in our country. Remember, this was manufactured division. This is not about people being good or bad. We are the inheritors of the divisions that were created before there was in the United States of America. And so our task now is to figure out, what do we do, regardless of the outcome of this election, what do we do as a nation to forge a new identity for ourselves, regardless of what the demographics do, because this is going to be with us regardless.
And in 2042, we turn a demographic corner that changes what?
It means that the historic majority of white Americans would no longer be the majority. And we would be in a situation, a configuration that no one alive, no one would ever know how to experience that, because the United States has never experienced it. Now, I think we're seeing the rumblings of what happens because of what we've seen the last few years. This is a precursor to to the divisions and the rancor that could only grow if we don't get ahead of this as a nation.
So my message to those who feel like Donald Trump is that person that somehow is going to maintain that superiority they think they've had, though in reality they've never had. These racist systems were created not because of people's pigmentation, etc. It was a matter of controlling the entire system. And like I said, capitalism cannot exist without it. Our structures cannot exist without it, because when you have a corrosive system based on the abuse of others, when you have a system based on taking away more than you give, when you have a system that is, again, that is based on taking advantage of folks, making your profits off of the backs of everybody else, billionaires that have not earned $1 billion, because, well, nobody can really earn $1 billion if you're not stepping over somebody else. That's how it's done. The only way to keep your eye off the ball of those who are really harming you is have people fight among themselves. And as Wilkerson said, we've had this from the inception of our country, and we'll have it until we tackle it head on.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.